Hello, good evening, and thank you for joining me tonight. We're going to be talking some more about the Constitution of Jamaica. And in particular, we're going to talk about something very interesting that I discovered after paying close attention to the document that is called the Constitution of Jamaica, which, as you may or may not know, is referred to as the Order in Council. It came to us from Britain. Our political leaders might tell us that our founding fathers drafted the document and so on. But I think anyone who pays close attention to what's really going on and compare that document with others, similar former colonies of Great Britain, will notice a lot of similarities with that. It was also codified within the context of the British parliamentary tradition. So a lot of what you see there is in sync with the general principles of the UK Parliament. But we're going to get into that some more. So welcome again to all of you. Good to see you online. Lamar Pinnock, welcome, good night. Janet Chakanowski, Director of UIC, good to see you on as well. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Last week we began by looking at the Constitution from the perspective of what currently obtains, what drives the Constitution, what's the system of governance that we have in Jamaica, and then we took some time to look at the proposed system that the UIC has put together. Tonight, I'm going to walk through a few points, or more than a few points, that is now drawn from the Constitutional Reform Committee, things that they have looked at in terms of what's coming out now as kind of proposals from them, together with my thoughts on where this is taking us, where is it leading to. And then finally, I want to show you without any doubt that the existing document that we call the Jamaican Constitution is actually fraudulent. I'm going to make it very clear in no uncertain terms why that document is fraudulent and why we are really under no obligations to follow the document at all, which means there's implication for our laws and even the Constitutional Reform Committee. So stay tuned for all of that. Welcome, Patricia Burgess. Good to see you on as well. Good night to you. So I want to jump into it so we use our time very wisely tonight. So I want to kind of get started on some key issues that I've drawn from the Constitutional Reform Committee. And one of the first things that jumped out to me is that they're trying to extend the election due date by 2 years beyond the codified 5-year term limit if there is a national emergency. Now, why would they want to do this? Why would they want to extend the life of Parliament by 2 years? Meaning, if we elect the Prime Minister or elect the government at the start of a 5-year period, and they have a national emergency like they had in the 2020 period there, where the Prime Minister called an election in the midst of a so-called pandemic, where we were told that we needed to stay home, we needed to wear masks, we needed to social distance, we needed to avoid crowds. But when it suited the Prime Minister, he called a national election. He used the same basis for not calling a local election, but he used it to call a national election. Now, if he had this provision in the Constitution, he would have used it to extend the term of Parliament by 2 years. So you want to watch that one carefully, the attempt to extend the life of Parliament by 2 years in the case of a pandemic. This would allow the government to have emergency powers to violate your individual rights and freedom by an extra 2 years. So if the pandemic or whatever it is came, let's say, in the third year, or or in the fourth year, they could have those powers for the full 5-year period or whatever part of it, and then extend that by another 2 years. So this is very dangerous and something that you want to pay very close attention to and not allow yourself to be suckered into an arrangement that is detrimental to your health. A second part that I've seen is they plan to bar Jamaicans with dual citizenship from being elected to office. You might recall that in a previous segment, I explained that countries like Canada, for example, allows persons with dual nationalities, and citizenship. So I, who am a Jamaican with a Canadian citizenship, could sit in the Canadian Parliament and could even serve as Prime Minister in their system. Now they have 30 million people, and they have been doing this now for about 157 years, and it has worked very well for their country by not limiting the talent pool that they have to draw on. Of course, Jamaica is very different. We have only about 3 million people here in Jamaica, and our numbers are declining rapidly. In fact, right now, for the first time in Jamaica's history, we're no longer growing in terms of population. We're declining in terms of population, with more than half of our numbers living in other countries, forced into that by virtue of bad governance, causing many of us to become economic refugees in other countries. And not just economic, many Jamaicans leave Jamaica because they feel unsafe. It's a very unsafe environment from a security standpoint. It's a very insecure environment in terms of financials. And more parents are becoming very distraught and concerned about sending their children to schools here in Jamaica because of the conditions that's going on. Then there are those of us health scare system. So Jamaica has some serious problems, which have forced many of us out of the country. And by extension, Jamaicans who leave become citizens in other countries. And that comes with benefits. There's your pension benefits and all kind of other stuff, including the ability to travel widely around the world and do business around the world. But the direction of the government now in their attempt to change the Constitution is to further narrow it so that even if you have Commonwealth citizenship, once you have citizenship of another country, then you cannot run for office and you cannot hold high office. So the goal here is really to ensure they lock off the potential of Jamaicans who have built skills and competencies overseas to come back and contribute without giving up their citizenship and the value that comes with that. This is a plan really to keep Jamaica as corrupt as it is and to be controlled with vote buying. Oftentimes you cannot buy or easily diaspora because of their economic strength. But it's very easy to buy majority of Jamaicans. This whole plan in terms of a reform power to preserve their power and to ensure that the country works the way they want it to work in their interest and not so much in the interest of the Jamaican people. Once again, good night to all of you. Somebody corrected me and saying Canadian population is about 40 million. No problem. Very good. Thank you for that, Kirk. 30 million, 40 million, whatever it is, it's a big number compared to our 3 million. But the bottom line is, so far, if you look at the changes that they're proposing, it's not so much to improve governance as it is to increase and deepen their control of our country. Now, a third proposal, which is very significant, I want you to pay attention to this. They're proposing to change the Senate to reconfigure it. Now, currently the Senate is designed so that the Prime Minister appoints 13 persons, whoever he wants to appoint. There's there's very little in the way of limitations based on, just whether you're Jamaican and you or a certain age and so on. But very little rules around this. The Prime Minister is able to appoint 13 friend and company. If there's a big friend that he has in the corporate Jamaica who wants to transition into politics, he can put him into the Senate or her. That builds the person's profile. He can give them a ministerial position, so they start to talk on TV, and you get used to them, and then later on, they can then be placed in a safe seat or any seat, and then makes it into parliament and so on. So it has always been used as a tool to profile persons for future electoral runs, So the Senate is used also to give the Prime Minister the upper hand in the Senate because he automatically appoints a majority of 13 members. The opposition leader gets to appoint the rest of the Senate, which is appoint 8 members. So you can see the duality here. The system is designed already for partisan politics. It's designed to maintain that structure by the Prime Minister putting in 13 and the opposition leader putting in 8. That's a current system. That's 21 members of the Senate. Prime Minister 13, opposition leader 8. Now, watch carefully what they're proposing now. They're proposing now to have 15 being appointed by the Prime Minister, 9 being appointed by the opposition leader, and 3 being appointed by the President, which is previously the Governor General. They're going to change the name of the Governor General to President and give that person the authority now to appoint 3. So the number in the Senate will go from 21 to 27. Now, that's not a problem. The number is not a problem so much. But I want to focus on the balance of power now. So previously, if the Prime Minister needed a 2/3 majority in the Senate to give him the power to pass into law a particular act or legislation, he would need to get 1 member of the Senate opposition to vote with the government so that that piece of legislation can go through based on the current Constitution. You would have to get at least 1 person from the government side to agree, which means, generally speaking, you have to get a consensus between the government and the opposition for certain laws to go through. So, for example, in the case of a pandemic where the Prime Minister wants to do some serious things that will violate our constitutional rights, so to speak, or fundamental rights, he would need to go and negotiate with the opposition and get them to agree, so he gets that 2/3 majority in the Senate by having 1 member of the opposition joining him. Now watch me carefully. In the new configuration, you're going to have the Prime Minister having 15, and that's the governing side 15, the opposition 9. Now, if you do the math, and you want to get 2/3 of 27, so 27 times 2 divided by 3, you need 18 persons now to side with the government to pass this law. Now, the government only has 15, so he needs 3 more. Look what happens here. All the government would need to get is the Governor General's 3 senators to join with them to pass this bill, and they therefore bypass the opposition party to do so. So this is a very skillful and cunning trick, which is expected. This is how the Prime Minister has always operated. He's very cunning and very tricky. And here we are seeing that coming out in the Constitutional Reform Committee, where they have now fashioned it so that they can get around the opposition, if needs be, by having the President or Governor General, which, by the way, would have been appointed by the Prime Minister on consultation with the opposition leader. And the method they have in place for that is all you have to do is consult. You don't have to agree. So if the opposition leader disagree, The current structure that they're proposing is that the Prime Minister will then be able to rely on his majority in the House and his majority in the Senate to appoint the Governor General, which effect makes the Governor General an instrument or tool of the Prime Minister rather than a non-partisan office holder. So this is quite tricky and quite subtle, but very dangerous. And that's what they're trying to do with the Senate. I hope you're understanding so far. Let me do a quick check-in and see if you're following. If you are following, just type yes where you are so I can know that this is making sense to you. Type no if it's not very clear to you, so I can probably look at improving the way I'm explaining this before I move into the other segments. All right, so most people are following, I hope. All right, wonderful. So let's move on now to another item. So they have decided that they're not going to fully separate the powers. Now, in the current Constitution, you have the executive branch of government, which is the cabinet, right? The executive branch is the cabinet. That's where you have the Prime Minister and the ministers of government, like transport, finance, education, and so on. That group is the cabinet and is the executive branch, or so we're told. Then you have what is called the legislative branch. And they call this a bicameral system, meaning two branches of the legislature. One is the House of Representatives, where you have all the MPs sitting. So all the MPs, whichever party they're elected from, forms the House of Representatives. And then you have the Senate, which are all these appointments I just spoke about earlier on. So you have the Senate as one part of the House. It's called the upper chamber. And you have the House of Representatives, which is called the lower chamber. So that's the legislature. So that's one branch, the legislative branch, which has two parts, the executive branch, which is the cabinet, and then you have now the judiciary, which is the legal branch, the branch that can say if what the government is doing is constitutional or not. And by the way, they don't just say if it's constitutional or not. Somebody has to take the government to court, find money and energy to go to court, to then cause the court to rule that a law is unconstitutional. What a waste of time and energy, a waste of money, and a way of ensuring that whatever the wealthy doesn't want to be challenged doesn't get challenged generally, because the people are too poor to challenge anything. So only when the wealthy or the poor come together, or one or two persons strain and find some way of going to court, that you might have justice. But that aside, what I want to point out right now is that the decision by the Constitutional Reform Committee is that they will not seek to have clear separations of powers. They're going to keep the existing system where we don't have clear separation of powers between the different branches of government. They're going to remain muddled. Now, one thing they're going to change, currently, the monarch of England, the monarch of England is able to overrule any of those branches, really, because it's the monarch's legislature, it's the monarch's cabinet, and it's the monarch's judiciary. So in a sense, the real executive of Jamaica is the monarch working through the Governor General, and they have given the Prime Minister and the cabinet leeway to do whatever they want, provided it does not significantly conflict with the interest of the monarchy through the Governor General. So while we were taught to believe that it's the monarchy is mostly ceremonial, it's really more serious than that. It's just that our government has never really done anything that is not in keeping with what the monarchy wants to happen in Jamaica. So as long as they're not doing anything to really challenge the direction that the monarchy or the constitution that the monarchy blessed is taking Jamaica into, then the monarchy will not intervene through the Governor General to stop the process or interfere or otherwise. So basically, Jamaica has really been a vassal state. It is still a colonial entity, but the optics have been adjusted, so it's not clearly so. Okay? Now, it's very important to realize that the government has decided not to push for proper separation. Now, let me explain to you what separation of power really means. What you want in a system of governance is that there are checks and balances that are built in. If you take a company, for example, a corporate entity, it would have proper checks and balances, for example, in ensuring that the management team is counterbalanced by the board of directors, and that there are internal controls which says, for example, the president can't just do this, or the general manager can't just do this. He has to go through a mechanism, or the financial controller has to go through a mechanism that checks his power, checks her power. Yeah. So what would be an ideal check and balance system in any government is that your executive branch is not commingled with your legislative branch, and that the judiciary is fully independent of both of those branches, so that they can act impartially and according to objective laws to protect the interests of ultimately the citizens. Because a good constitution, a proper constitution, would see the citizens as sovereign, and the constitution is designed to protect that sovereignty and put the government, therefore, in its place, so it never gets to infringe on the sovereignty of the citizens. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me back up a second now. In the current system, the prime minister is also a member of parliament. So the prime minister is sitting both in the legislature and in the cabinet. They have a conflict there. The MPs and senators, some MPs and some senators, based on the prime minister's wishes, of his own volition, with no controls to fetter him or her, he gets to appoint any number of members from the House of Representatives, the MPs, and any number of members from the Senate. Well, I think it's limited by up to 4, it says over there for the Senate, 4 of the Senate, and any number of members from the House of Representatives to be ministers of government sitting in the cabinet. So these people now who would have provided oversight and would have been independent of the cabinet and can challenge it and can question its actions and can investigate it, are now compromised because they're also a part of the cabinet. Yeah. Also, even those MPs who are not given a ministerial position, because of the tremendous powers invested in the prime minister to form the executive and to put in and kick out whoever he or she wills, the MPs are afraid, those MPs from his party, of course, are afraid to challenge because the consequences will be dire. Remember, these same MPs also depend on the party for their funding or for them to be able to win, because every Jamaican knows if you're not running for one or the other of the two controlled opposition, the two colonial parties, you have almost zero chance of winning. And you're gonna be starved of cash because the PSOJ oligarchs only fund those two parties, right? So it's very difficult for you to be able to win unless something else is done, which the UIC is trying to get done. So MPs are compromised. They're not free to speak their voice. They're not free to represent their constituents. They're not free to stand up for what they believe in, because the system is designed to muzzle them and to have them be subservient to the party, to the executive of the party, to the prime minister, and to the donors that back the prime minister and his party, and so on. The same is true of the opposition senators and MPs, but to a lesser extent, but still the same. The opposition MPs, look to the opposition leader to give them shadow minister portfolio, and if and when he or she is elected, for him to give them positions. So you have a problem. This is why the UIC has separated the whole thing. In our proposed constitution, you elect the executive branch of government separately. So you elect a president, a core cabinet that then nominates subject matter experts who are vetted by the Senate and approved by the House, but those persons are not taken from the Senate or the House. They're qualified and competent Jamaicans from anywhere around the world, and of course locally, who have the skills and competences that are befitting the role that you're asking them to occupy as a minister of government. Yeah. So that's the next item there, where they have decided to keep the system which lends itself more to corruption and reduces the efficiency and effectiveness of government. Yeah. They have decided that that they're really going to give us a constitution that is worse than what now exists, because the new constitution or the revised constitution that they're bringing in is going to entrench partisan politics, which is a key problem. It's going to reduce checks and balances, which we need more of. And they're actually going to be misleading the nation into thinking that we're now a republic, when in fact we're not, because even that needs to be tested. We need to talk about what is a republic. And I'll come to that later. But in essence, what they're proposing for us now is actually worse than what we currently have. What we currently have is bad, and what they're proposing now is worse. Can you believe this? So what they're proposing to change from and to, they're going from bad to worse. If you look at the points I'm raising here, and I'm going to raise some more of those points with you. Another key point to look at is the fact that the revised constitution will not make the government more effective. It will not make the government more efficient, and it will not make the government more accountable. It will simply make Jamaica more corrupt and weaker than it is now. And I'm going to tell you how. I told you some before. Now, you probably will agree with me that Jamaica needs more than a symbolic change from the foreign monarch to a local president. I don't think there are many Jamaicans who go to bed at night thinking that if we just become a nation that is no longer referring to the foreign monarchy and simply refers to a president now, that Jamaica is going to be better. I don't think there's any Jamaican, except the most tribal partisan, who lacks the mental acuity to be able to think farther than the color of their party. But I don't think there's any Jamaican who is there thinking, if we could just get rid of the monarchy and replace that with a president, we're going to be better off. I think the people need meaningful change. And that changes from a highly corrupt system to a system of good and effective governance. And that is what the UIC has been talking about for years. How do we have good governance, effective governance that addresses the real bread and butter issues of the Jamaican people? Basic things like, the crime problem, the gap in our education system, the lack of quality healthcare, the anemic economy that leaves most people less financially secure than they would otherwise be in more productive countries, and so on. Jamaicans need and want, by their 60 to 70% rejection of the electoral process, what I call a non-partisan constitutional republic that would eliminate political tribalism, eliminate political corruption, and most importantly, eliminate the waste, the theft, and the mismanagement of their hard-earned tax dollars and national resources. If you look back at the last 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, 20 years, 30 years, even the last 10 years, the amount of waste and theft and mismanagement caused by corruption is alarming. And this is costing us, the Jamaican people, because we are ending up with not having the environment we need to achieve our full potential. So we really cannot afford to trust our republic to the fate of these two colonial parties when you think about it. They have led us to the dysfunctional place where we are today. So how can we, in good conscience, being sane people, if we choose to be, how can we sit down and say we're going to trust these two parties that have failed us so dramatically to put guns and ammunition in the hands of our kids? They created garrisons, they bulldoze our homes, they call us squatters, they have run up our debt, our credit card, if you will, to tremendous heights, and then cause us to suffer to pay that off or pay it down. And we're still paying it down to this day. They've crippled us with FinSAC. They've destroyed our bus service, destroyed our airline or airport, all kind of things. So I'm amazed when I see persons actually behaving as if we're dealing with two credible entities, and we're relating to them in a respectful manner as though they deserve any form of respect whatsoever. They've lost the right and they lack the credibility to lead, to instruct, or to guide our national affairs. If you're honest, if you were to look at them in the way you would look at, say, the manager of a company, a general manager, if any general manager managed your company the way that these people have managed your country, I'm sure you would fire them if you had the opportunity to. But for some strange reason, a segment of Jamaica, about 30% or so of Jamaica, continues to have faith and confidence in these people. And they're the ones that go out to vote for them, which is really sad. Now, those who, in my opinion, those who embraced and facilitated and continued the divide and conquer system of their colonial masters, those who gave our young boys the guns and created the garrison, those who stole or mismanaged billions of our tax dollars, simply cannot and should not be trusted now with reforming or replacing the fake constitution that you see today. How can we dare trust them with such a very precious thing as our constitution? I've already pointed out to you, and I will show even more clearly so, that what we have today as the Jamaican Constitution is not the Jamaican Constitution. It is not a document for us to have any sentimental attachment to. It does not reflect us. It is not of us. It is not by us, and it is not for us. That's clear. But how can we even slightly consider allowing these two gangs, these two colonial parties, to tell us that they have the credibility, they have the right, even the responsibility to now give us a new document or a reformed document and claim that this will be our guiding principle, our guiding laws? No, we can't afford that. We need to find a way to stop them. And we have to stop the PSOJ oligarchs and the colonial masters who fund and control them from making 80 years of bad governance more permanent with their fake Republican constitution. We must stop them. And as I go on with the points I'm about to make tonight, you're going to see even more clearly why we have to ensure that we rise up and stop them. And I really mean stop them. Now, many of you are oftentimes, more inclined to talk than to take action for whatever reason. I can never understand, how we have lost that spirit of Nanny and Sam Sharp and Bogle, but we seem to have lost it. There's this general disdain for doing more than talking and doing more than hoping and wishing and literally begging these two parties to do us a favor. They won't do us any favor. They're committed to their cause. The founding fathers of the two colonial parties, they loved, they cherished, and they adored the monarchy and did everything in their power to protect and preserve a positive image of the monarchy in our so-called constitution that they agreed to impose upon us. Last week I shared it with you. Bustamante says, I am with the Queen and I am for the Queen. And Norman Manley went about and drafted a constitution that deeply embedded the monarchy and protected interest in the document that they tell us is our constitution. That alone disqualifies them and their parties back then and today from having anything to do with our governance and in shaping any constitution for this country. As I said before, the monarchy has never interfered with the administration of Jamaica. And P.J. Patterson backed this up in his recent pronouncement. He says the monarchy has never interfered with the administration of Jamaica. Of course not, and rightly so, because the government of Jamaica has never once done anything contrary to what the monarchy desired. They have followed the course of the colonial constitution to the nth degree, and we have seen the results. We have seen the result of them following this prescription for our lives. As the monarchy's representative in Jamaica, every decision or appointment made by the Governor General is in fact an appointment by the monarchy. This means the monarchy has been involved in the administration of Jamaica to this date. They have tried to suggest it's purely ceremonial. It's not. These are key appointments, very important appointments, right across the country's governance. The monarchy, through the Governor General, has been making appointments, and they're important. We do not need a ceremonial president, as some suggest, in order to have a unifying force in our governance. Oh, we need to have a ceremonial president and we need to have a president who is above the partisan fray, and we're going to try to find a way for the prime minister to nominate and consult with the opposition leader, and between them they come up with a person. No, we don't need that. What we need is a unifying constitution. What we need is the UIC's non-partisan constitution, where you institutionalize non-partisan thinking rather than maintain the partisan tribalism and claim you now have this person that you have made into a unifying force in our governance. That's foolishness. And if you want to see how that works, look at all the other fake republics around the world, and you'll see that it doesn't work. What you need is a constitution that is designed to unite people, a constitution that is designed to protect the liberty and rights and freedom of the people. What you need is a constitution which is designed to ensure good governance that empowers the people by giving them what belongs to them, beginning with their right to their life, their liberty, and their property, including physical property rights, land reparation. Now, many of you know that the former Prime Minister, P.J. Patterson, he speaks very, very well. And last week I showed you in the last session, you can go back and look at it. We looked at his speeches, one of his speech where he was talking about the Constitution in recent weeks. And, he's no doubt well-spoken. He sounds good, and he has a tremendous amount of experience. But let's think about it for a second. P.J. Patterson, let's think about the person, P.J. Patterson. He has had 18 and a half years continuously in office as Deputy Prime Minister for a short stint and then Prime Minister for about 14 or more years out of it. If you look back at his 18 years in office, straight, he has been in office before that, but straight 18 years. If you look back at his time in office, no matter how nice and sweet him sound today, his tenure, his stewardship, his performance makes him less than credible. In fact, in my opinion, he deserves to be charged, tried and prosecuted for crimes against the Jamaican people in relation to FinSAC and other matters. So, as nice as he sounds, he doesn't really hold any place in terms of somebody we can trust with his pronouncement as to what he thinks should be for Jamaica. Mr. P.J. Patterson and Mr. Bruce Golding, another former prime minister who has no credibility either, rightly pointed out, though, the folly of the CRC, the Constitutional Reform Committee. They made a proposal concerning the appointment of the ceremonial president. The best solution is to, in my opinion, and they believe in the appointment of the ceremonial president. They have kind of changed their position over time on this, but I believe that it is very important that Jamaican people directly elect the head of state and the head of government to fully separate that branch from the legislative branches and from the judiciary. If you have a prime minister, even in consultation with an opposition leader, appointing or agreeing to a particular person being the president of Jamaica, that is not separation of powers. The best executive is one where the people elected that executive, and it's completely detached and separate from the other branches of government, and is able to address the needs of the people, address the executive responsibilities of the people. So what you're looking for in your executive is your management team, your CEO and your CFO and your COO and so on. And they're going to manage the day-to-day affairs of the country, implementing policy, while your legislative branch is there to oversee and to craft new laws that will strengthen the operations of the country. So you don't want any mixing up as to the origin of your president, your CEO. You want somebody who is elected by the people to carry out a mandate that they would have articulated to the people. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. And so our position is that, but bigger than that, or the antecedent to that, what you need to have leading into that is a 100% publicly funded campaign financing system. A system that frees you from the PSOJ money and control. A system that frees you from big money or bad money controlling your political leadership. And that's why the UIC came up with a design that we call a 100% publicly funded campaign financing system. And what this does, it ensures that the president, the House of Representatives, the senators are all elected without private money. Whether that private money is legitimate or not, we're removing it from the table. Whether it's small donations or big donations, we're removing it from the table. By having a less expensive electoral process, but one which is more inclusive and transparent, and one which allows all of us to be heard, regardless of our partisan affiliation or not. So if a person is not belonging to a party, but they otherwise qualify to run by having the prerequisites to run, they're treated equally as those who may come through a political party. The same is true of a person who may be financially poor or limited and a person who is financially well off. The system is equitable because it allows both the rich and the poor to compete on a financially level playing field. There might be other inequities which we're not responsible for fixing. One person might be a better communicator than the other. One person might be a more ingenious thinker than the other. That's fine. That's where you demonstrate your prowess. But if we remove money as an impeding factor, or money as a crutch, or money as an enabling factor, now you allow the people to hear from all those who qualify and are prepared to offer solutions to the country through the political process. And so we have designed a 100% publicly funded campaign financing system to address that as part of our constitutional reform. I wonder if you notice that our approach to constitutional reform is to really provide solutions that's going to fix the systemic problems we have in Jamaica, as opposed to doing a window dressing and slipping in some little more tricks or ways of keeping the same thing while suggesting you're changing. The UIC is about real change, while the other two parties are about games or about facades or optics or tricks at how to maintain the corruption without appearing to do so. We must allow the executive branch to staff and manage departments or ministries with subject matter experts according to a transparent, efficient, and effective set of recruitment, employment, and termination policies that are scrutinized and monitored by the other branches of government, the judiciary, the House, and Senate, as independent safeguards against bad governance. Can you imagine if we had that today? A separate executive branch that is managing the country, that we have, instead of ministers who may or may not know what they're talking about, we have only ministers who know what they're talking about. They're experts. They're not politicians necessarily. They didn't run for office and win any political seat. But those who ran, those who are in the legislature, would be able to provide oversight. They'll be able to ask questions, challenge, investigate, and ensure that the government is being run properly by not being a part of it themselves. They're not a part of the executive. They're not a part of the executing function. They're a part of the oversight branch only, the legislative branch only. So the executive branch does the other part, hire the right people, at least nominate them for vetting and approval, maintain proper internal controls that are transparent, have policies that ensures efficiency and effectiveness, both in the recruitment process and the termination process, and assessing value for money and the performance indicators and so on. And then now the judiciary is there actively, not passively like we have it now, but actively engaged in checking and testing if laws and policies are consistent with the Constitution, so that the poor Jamaican man or woman don't have to find money to go challenge the big government. You have an active judiciary whose job is to test the legitimacy of all piece of legislation, every policy, to ensure that the rights and freedoms of the Jamaican people are always protected from its government. And the House and the Senate are equally endowed to do their part in safeguarding the Jamaican people. And they're incentivized to do so by a 100% publicly funded system that allows them the independence from party and from donors to be able to speak on behalf of their constituents with confidence, not fearing any retribution from their party leader or their party hierarchy or the funders of their party or the funders of their own campaigns. Our system gives us, the UIC system, our non-partisan constitutional republic system, gives us these safeguards, gives us these checks and balances to protect the interests of every single citizen, rich or poor. Whether them live down in a ghetto or on top of the hill, they can live with confidence knowing that the government, the governance model, the constitution, the entire process of running the country is designed to protect them. I hope I'm making sense to you, and you're able to follow. And you're getting your questions ready, because I'm going to answer questions later on as well. But I just want to say this: there is no point in claiming to abolish the monarchy while keeping the Privy Council as our final court of appeal. I don't think anybody in their logical mind should think that we claim that we are a republic and claim that we have abolished the monarchy and still keep the monarchy's Privy Council as ours. That would make no sense at all. Nor does it make sense to have the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal if we're not clearly committed to becoming a federation or, a united, independent Caribbean states, a federation where we bring all the countries together, and we're as provinces and states, and we become one country, one nation. If we're not going to do that, there's no point in having the CCJ as our final court of appeal either. So if we're going to become a republic, let us become a republic. We'll have our own government and our own court, our own final court of appeal. And don't tell me that we don't have what it takes to do so, because if we don't have what it takes to do so, then we shouldn't be independent in the first place. If we don't have what it takes to have our own court of justice and to make sure that court system works to protect the interests of Jamaicans, then there's no point in us being an independent nation. We need to call Britain and tell them we want to be an extra province. So the UIC's position is very different from some others. We don't want the Privy Council, and we don't want the Caribbean Court of Justice either. What we want is a Republic of Jamaica, or a commitment that we become the United States of the Caribbean, if you will. And the UIC is all for that. We would love to have all our Caribbean countries united, but until then, we can't share a court of justice when the principles by which we're going to operate would be different. A UIC Jamaica is a Jamaica which is united, strong, and free. A Jamaica that completely protects the individual sovereignty of our citizens, individual sovereignty, as well as our collective sovereignty. No other state in the Caribbean has yet embraced such an idea. So we could not share a common court when our ideals are significantly different. And therefore, the rule of law would apply quite differently across the territories. But as long as we're as mixed up and confused as we are, and still calling ourselves independent while pretty much following the destructive and divisive partisan model of divide and conquer, then of course we can share a CCJ if that's the kind of place we want to be, but the UIC doesn't agree with that. Now, a very important point that captures all of tonight's discussion, very, very big part of why we're having this talk tonight, is what I'm about to share with you. I will have other points to come, but I want to break here and kind of share this with you now, because this is critical. It is something which I don't think many of the talking heads have been talking about at all, but I want to talk about it with you tonight. I want to share it with you. I want it to sink in deeply in the recesses of your brain, and I want you to contemplate it carefully, because it has implications for how we move forward as a people and as a movement. It has to do with the origin of the so-called Jamaican Constitution. The Jamaican people were not consulted at all in the formation of the document we now refer to as the Constitution. I'll say that again. The Jamaican people were not consulted at all, in the formation of the document we currently call the Jamaican Constitution. That's serious enough. The Jamaican people were not consulted by way of a referendum on whether or not they wanted the existing document that we call the Jamaican Constitution, which I call a fake constitution. The two colonial parties decided for the Jamaican people and proceeded to establish clauses in a document to entrench their system with provisions requiring a 2/3 majority in their House and their Senate, as well as a referendum to change this fake constitution. These two colonial parties took it upon themselves to draft a document, seek the blessing of their colonial master, and return to Jamaica with a document where they established clauses that entrenched in that document the master-slave economic system, the bad system of governance, the corrupt system I have been describing to you. And they entrenched that in a document and say to us that if we want that document to change, them if they agree with it in a parliament among themselves by 2/3 majority, meaning even if one of them win and have a change of heart and want to do what's right for Jamaica, the other one if you agree with it too, so that you have a 2/3 in both their house, I'm calling it their house, and a Philly house, their House of Representatives or Parliament, and their Senate, they must get 2/3 majority in each of those branches. And then after that, now they say they must come to the people of Jamaica and have a referendum. And only then can those entrenched elements of their colonial constitution can be changed. I submit to you tonight, my fellow Jamaicans, that we're not to follow that. I know the Prime Minister wouldn't agree with me because, like his predecessor, he loves the monarchy as much as he seems fighting with his controlled opponent on his dual citizenship. It's only for political one-upmanship. It's not because he has any great disdain for the monarchy. He loves it and he wants to keep it, and vice versa. But I submit that all we need now is a majority of Jamaicans voting to replace that fake constitution with a Jamaican one, because we never voted for the one that now exists. We never ratified that constitution, which means it's a fake constitution, and all the laws emanating from it are fraudulent, and all the committees coming out of it are fraudulent, and all the policies that is based on it are fraudulent, and all the agencies that have been developed on it are fraudulent, and all the commissions that exist are fraudulent, because you're coming from a fraudulent source. That is why the UIC has always maintained that we don't need to tinker with it. We don't need to modify it. We don't need to update it. We need to rubbish it. We need to discard it. And we need to write a constitution that reflects who we are and who we want to be. And I submit to you that who we are at the core are a freedom-loving people. And who we want to be and who our leaders died to become are truly free people. They wanted to have a united people, a free people, a liberated people, an empowered people. And our Constitution must reflect that. What we have now is a sham. It reflects foolishness. It reflects fairy tale. a concoction of colonial ideals and ideas, and they're playing with us, toying with us. Notice that the so-called Constitutional Reform Committee, notice that they did nothing to address the obvious failings of our electoral process, except to entrench their bipartisan Electoral Commission of Jamaica in it. Why? To protect and maintain your two-party monopoly, because that ECJ, that Electoral Commission of Jamaica, is not the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. It's the Electoral Commission of the two colonial parties. It's there to serve their interests, to protect and preserve the bipartisan system that they have set up, to give us the illusion of choice and to keep us that way in what may be justly defined as a two-party monopoly or a two-party dictatorship. I hope you're following. I hope you're following. Now, somebody says in the discussion, in the comment section, Mr. Patterson, I hope, I would like to see you incorporate a more participatory model of decision making, which involves institutions such as popular assemblies, referendums, and grassroots think tanks. Any system that allows you to give any special interest group any special place in your governance model is dangerous. The model that the UIC is prescribing is the ultimate participatory model. It is a model where your representatives are truly of the people and by the people and for the people. And we achieve that by our 100% publicly funded system of campaign financing. So you're now separating your representatives from big money, from the PSOJ oligarchs, from bad money, the criminals on the ground world that would fund campaigns. And how we accomplish this, is by not so much giving the candidates money to spend, but giving the candidates access to the people. That's really what politicians need, All we need is access to the people. So you give every candidate who qualifies, you give them the same access to newspaper, the same access to radio, the same access to television, the same access to the internet, the same access to town hall meetings, and the same access to debates. What more you want? If as a candidate you get to talk to the people, you get to show the people your policies, your plans, your agenda, your manifesto, your mandate, whatever it is, you get to show the people that. What more you want? You don't get to buy them curry goat, you don't get to buy them a drink, you don't get to run up and down and have them hang out a bus like idiots and have people, get themselves hurt and so on. What you've now lift the standards of discourse. You've now lift the people up to a higher standard, because now, rather than being fool, rather than being mesmerized with all kind of idiotic campaign stuff, the people now have to focus on listening. On our system, the ballot won't show you the name of any party. It shows Joseph Patterson, Brian Williams, Mary Jane. So if you're going to vote, you have to know why you're voting for Joseph Patterson or this other person. So the ballot will just have the name of the person and the office they're running for. When they're elected and they come to the House, what we call the Congress, they sit alphabetically. There's no seating for green and orange and blue. There's no seating for government versus opposition, because every elected candidate is a part of the government and have an equal say in their contribution to the deliberation. There's nothing that will give one MP a superior status to another, because the executive branch is separate. Our Senate will not be appointed our Senate will be elected. So every senator would have been elected through that 100% publicly funded system as well. So every senator would be somebody that will be fully representing his parish, one per parish. Every MP will fully represent his constituency and must live there. And the executive branch now will be fully elected to focus on the executive. And so there's a separation now which allows and incentivizes the MPs and senators to watch the executive like a hawk, because they don't have any say. They're not a part of the money movement. They're external. They're like an auditor. They're like a compliance officer. They're like a referee, a monitor. And they're not compromised in this role. So they can do it with laser beam focus. The corruption will be harder to do and harder to cover up. And now you're going to have real votes in the House of Representatives because they're not controlled by any party. They're controlled now by two things: the quality of the policy and what I'm going to tell them constituents when they go home if they don't pay attention and vote right. So the UIC system affords the greatest degree of participation, but we don't complicate it by trying to pick groups to participate in it. We allow the electoral process to work, and the groups now can focus on their work without being politicized in the process. Yeah. But let me continue. Now, the Constitutional Reform Committee, they're committed to maintaining the legalized fraudulent partnership with the PSOJ oligarchs, which uses the monies that they extract from the Jamaican people to fund their campaign and media coverage to stamp out third parties with their unfair financial advantage. I hope you understand this. Listen, I've been trying for some time now to get us to realize the game that is being played. And if we understand the game, we'll be more motivated to do what is right, to join, volunteer, and donate and help the UIC to take back our country. It won't happen any other way. There's no miracle out there. There's no other way that the UIC is going to rise up and do anything without you. But I want you to understand why you are so important. The current system is legalized fraud, okay? You have two colonial parties with a constitution which is fraudulent, which is designed to keep them in power, to monopolize the political space, to have a permanent two-party dictatorship. And it's in collusion with the PSOJ oligarchs, those who control the mass of our economy. And they have gotten that by unfair means. They've gotten that by oppressing the people, using the political system to oppress the people. So these oligarchs, they give roughly the same amount of money to these two parties and fan them out to go and lie to us, deceive us, divide us, distract us, while they get to continue to rape the nation's coffers. This large amount of funds, they have that available to give back to these two parties to repeat the cycle year after year after year after year. So if we're going to break that cycle, we have to understand it and recognize that we're doomed if we do not come together and pool our time, our talent, and our resources, financial resources, intellectual resources, labor, whatever you can do. You might not be the smartest cookie in the room, but you can give time and energy to the movement. You might be very brilliant. You can give that to the movement as well. You might have a lot of money. You can give that. You may have a little bit. You can. But if we don't come together, and it's not the entire country, it's not all 3 million of us here. All it takes is about 2,000 in the diaspora and 1,000 here at home to lead the fight. And we overcome, because the masses are just waiting to follow somebody. They're just waiting. They're dying for change to come. But they're weak. And so a few of us, if we have the capacity and the stamina and determination to be strong, we can pull it off. But we have to understand what we're up against. It's legalized fraud. And so they're controlling our economy, controlling our tax dollars, and they're using it against us. So we now have to sacrifice. We have to reach into our pockets, reach into our time bank, reach into our intellectual capacity, and bring that to the table and join hands with me in the UIC for us to bring the change about. There's no other way. There's no other way. Mandela and his guys had to sacrifice to break the bondage of apartheid in South Africa. Lee Kuan Yew and his team in Singapore had to sacrifice to overcome their challenges to make that country as great as it is. We too will have to do the same. There's no other way. We cannot, and we will not escape this situation unless we decide to do something about it. Well, Fireburn is not Crawford who said that. Crawford is copying what I have said. You see, and what they do from time to time when they realize that things are coming out, they start to copy and say so that people think that they're genuine. They're not genuine. Anyone who is a member of the inner circle of either of those two parties are not somebody you can trust. Because if they, it's either they're dumb. If they're dumb, then of course you don't want to trust a dumb person. But if they're intelligent and decide to be a part of the inner circle of any of those two colonial parties, then they're just as dangerous as a dumb person, right? And even more so. So you can't trust anybody who's a part of those inner circles, not one of them, because they're willingly participating in deception. Yeah? They're willingly participating in the deception. And so we cannot trust them. We cannot rely on them. We don't even need to quote them except to make it clear what's happening and what's going on. Yeah? And so I strongly suggest that we pay attention to what's really going on, that we understand the game that is being played, and that we rise up and work against it. Mr. Siaga was correct when he said to P.J. Patterson after the 2016 elections, when the two parties won a 32-31 split, meaning they barely had a one-seat majority. And Mr. Siaga said to Mr. Patterson that this 32-31 split was a sign that the nation was very divided and wanted one Jamaica. They no longer wanted, they never wanted the divided, the deceptive, the destructive Jamaica that these two parties created. If you went back in time and look at the Jamaican people in the 1920s, the 1930s, even into the 1960s, the early 60s, it took a while for these two parties to bring us to where we are now, to bring us to this low level of where we can't even think anymore. Every time we're trying to have a conversation, everybody think in terms of this party or that party. They can't even think anymore and understand and appreciate what's really happening and have an honest conversation about it. They're all trying to defend one or the other of their two colonial parties. Oh, when we were in power, it was better. They can't even have a rational conversation. But there's a time in the history of Jamaica where our people were more intelligent, believe it or not, less access to book education like we have today. Today, more of us have gone to secondary school and even beyond. But back then, our people were more socially developed. We had more kinship. we were more honest. We were less deceptive, less unproductive. Scamming wasn't a big thing among us, per se. But over time, we were made into a very divisive, destructive, unhealthy, corrupt people. If you were to define the Jamaican characteristic today, and I hate to say this, I take no pleasure in saying this, but we're more characterized today by ignorance and arrogance, by being deceptive and tricky and corrupt, by preferring to beg than produce. That's the culture that that's where they've brought us. We were not like this normally. We were not like this. They brought us to this. These two parties, they brought us to this. So we agree with Mr. Stiaga and Mr. PJ Patterson that they've destroyed our people, and our people are begging to be released. It's kind of sad because right now I think our people are so lost that they have given up for the most part. But our nation needs a constitution that will indeed create one Jamaica, united, strong, and free. And I'm sure that constitution cannot come from either of these two colonial parties. It's impossible to come from them. We have to start afresh, anew, clean. And the UIC is here for that. That's why we don't take sides with them. People try to pull us, oh, you should join with this one or join. No, we're not. We're totally for one Jamaica, united, strong, and free. I must admit again that Mr. PJ Patterson is correct, that very few people can be good ministers and good parliamentarians at the same time. This is why, as I said earlier on, we must separate the two and allow the most capable people to serve as ministers and not at the same time as MPs and senators. I'm going to be driving home these points to them because I want us, most of us never studied the Constitution. Even if we had civics in school, it is so poorly taught and so minuscule in its presentation, and it's actually reinforcing the fakeness of the Constitution rather than really helping us to understand what good governance is and how imperfect the current Constitution is. It will tell you things that make you think that this is good, because it tells you what ought to be rather than what is. The UIC likes to tell you what is, and then we work towards creating what ought to be. And I'll give you another example of how dismal this so-called constitutional reform process and proposal is. It's obvious to any well-thinking person that having fixed election dates, having a process of recall and impeachment of elected politicians is necessary for good governance. Yet they're not proposing that. After 80 years of these two colonial parties, we still don't have these basic provisions in our Constitution. We don't have fixed election dates. We don't have a process of recall. We don't have impeachment. And they claim that they're doing a constitutional reform. What a shame. You should be clear from all of this, that they're not serious about developing Jamaica. They're seriously not about fixing Jamaica. Jerable TV says social engineering is real. It took 80 years for them to perfect that system. They have removed the warrior spirit from the people, and now the people are accustomed to the engineering. Absolutely so. They have done a real good number on us, a very effective number on us. But we have to fight back. The current system, as described by the first vice president of the PNP in 1961, the current system, he says, makes the prime minister a dictator for 5 years. Norman Manley agreed with that, and Edward Seaga agreed that that was the case, but they kept it in place anyways. Amazing, eh? But what I see happening though in Jamaica is that the people are gradually moving away from these two parties in one way or the other. So you see the percentage of Jamaicans who are voting for them declining rapidly. Less and less Jamaicans. I remember when I looked at the stats some time ago, I saw where it moved from 48% didn't vote in the general election to 52%, and then the last one to 63%. So you have it really going up. In the local government election, I believe 72% did not vote in that election. So the people are moving away from them. The problem is they're moving away from even the system, meaning get involved. So they're not putting on their warrior suit. They're simply resigning themselves. So better not come. Nothing can change, which is the worst place to be in because things are changing. Soon, you're going to lose the right to be able to speak freely. It'll be considered hate speech or misinformation, and you'll be censored and locked down. And the more they lock us down and take away those rights, is the more permanent the system becomes, and the more hopeless the system becomes. And we just subtly slip right back into a modern form of slavery. Based on the gradual increase of Jamaicans withdrawing from the political process, tells me that these two parties have lost any right to claim that they represent the people of Jamaica. In fact, the sitting government only got 21% of the total potential votes based on the voters list, 21%. And the sitting opposition got even less than that, of course. And when you add to that the fact that they are bought and owned by the PSOJ oligarchs, and you add to that the fact that they buy votes. Now think about it. These two parties, by virtue of their owner also owning the media, they have free access to the media. Every day they're in the news, bombarding the citizens with their name and their identity being completely kept before the people. So they have full visibility, unlike the UIC, right? They have full visibility. They have full access to the media every single day, full access. They have full access to the PSOJ's large amount of cash. Yeah. They buy votes in order to be elected, and yet still they have so little support of the people. So they have doubly lost the right, any right that they might have had to lead any form of constitutional reform. They have no credibility, no legitimacy. It's we who give them legitimacy by the way we behave. We accept them as government, and we relate to them as though they're legitimate. They're not legitimate. And we must not legitimize them. We must stop it. We must recognize that they are occupying forces. They're occupying our government. They're terrorists. They're criminals. They are enemy combatants. They're working against us. They're foreign operatives. I know those sound kind of weird, but it's true. And they have been that way for years. You know how many of us they've gotten to kill ourselves, kill each other? They have imported guns and placed in our hands, and said, go kill each other. They've destroyed many of our young men, young boys, many families, destroyed many communities, ravished them. Even right now, there are communities across Jamaica right now where they have empowered criminal forces within those communities and are using them to commit all sorts of atrocities. And then we are respecting them as though they are legitimate. They're not legitimate. They are not legitimate at all. And they must not be treated as such. Yeah. Whole Earth Community says, we're feudal subjects right now. This is our political culture. Bottom-up transformation of political culture requires grassroots organization, not a top-down solution presented by a UIC messiah. Oh my goodness. That's how you see it, eh? That I'm a top-down solution presented by UIC messiah. That's quite unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Maybe a more meaningful response from you would be, here is the bottom-up solution that we can all join and work with. Here is how we have created a massive groundswell of bottom-up solution that is ready and able, and we don't have to rely on the UIC messiah. Which, by the way, I'm not the messiah. I've just taken the time to do the tremendous amount of work necessary at my own expense to create an opportunity for us and suffer the consequences for doing so, both physically, emotionally, and financially. And to have people like you and others come and say what you do. And that's the beauty of still having your freedom to communicate. But it would be nice if you would actually be productive and do something meaningful. One of the characteristics we have as a people is that it's easy for us to criticize. We can critique like hell. But the doing, that's where the missing element is, the doing. So my friend, you don't have to come here and criticize me. You can just simply go off and do what you know is right and create what you think is best. Because I'd be very happy if you go and create something that I can come and join because it is working and it is, I'm here creating and trying to get us to do something. So, if you have a better idea, go do it, man, and make us see so we can join it. Yeah. Juliet says the two parties need to go for the betterment of Jamaica. UIC is the better for Jamaica. Vote UIC for all of us. Thank you, Juliet. So yeah, man, anybody who have a better idea, than the UIC, you're free to do it. Nobody is stopping you, I hope. We have had persons who have left the movement and said that they don't like, well, mostly it's me. They don't like me per se, which is fine. You don't have to like me. And they don't like my approach and they have better ideas, but they can't build anything. So far, they haven't been able to do anything. They haven't created anything better for us to follow. It's always a work in progress, my friends. It's been a work in progress for the last 80 years. I'm sure there are many out there that should have joined Marcus Garvey back in the 1930s so that we could have overcome the assault from the PSOJ oligarch back then, the what do you call them? Plantocracy, and the media back then, the Gleaner Company and so on. But they never did. They left him and they allowed the powers that be to destroy him. And he died in England of a broken heart. I'm sure there are many people like you that were there having grand ideas and better ways of solving the problem, but didn't do anything. And in the end, we're right here today. Yeah. So, yeah. So Agro Valley Farm says, good night, Mr. Patterson. When people are not critical thinkers and are poorly educated, we'll have a strong inclination for voting for non-progressive people. All right. Yeah. Well, let me continue on to a few more points here. Now, If this constitutional reform does not result in a new system with good governance, and listen carefully, and land reparation for the descendants of the enslaved and marginalized indigenous people of this part of the world, it is nothing but a sham, and it's like putting lipstick on a pig. So whatever they come with, if it does not address the issues that I have raised here, if it does not give us good governance and give you back the land that was stolen from your ancestors, it's a sham. They're simply going to do some window dressing, put some whitewash on the tomb full of dead men's bones, lipstick on a pig. That's all they would have had. The UIC, interestingly enough, like the two colonial parties, is officially registered in accordance with the laws of Jamaica and the regulations of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Yet, the UIC was not invited to be a member of the so-called Constitutional Reform Committee. That alone tells you clearly that this is absolute foolishness. How can you have a Constitutional Reform Committee and the duly registered political party? We have met their requirements, their legal requirements. We have jumped through all the hoops that they put in front of us, overcome all the hurdles, fought them for 10 long months, and met all of their requirements. But we're not on that Constitutional Reform Committee, and rightly so, because that Reform Committee is a fraud, and it has no intention of really addressing the needs of the Jamaican people. So all the members of that committee, all of them, every single solitary one of them, are nothing but a bunch of yes ministers, all frauds themselves, playing their role of maintaining the status quo while pretending to be working on behalf of the Jamaican people. Not one of them will challenge this committee. Not one of them will go rogue and come to the Jamaican people and tell us that this is a sham. They're all a bunch of partisans, one way or the other, working to preserve the existing partisan system of governance. But the UIC stands for a non-partisan system, one that will respect the rights and freedoms of all Jamaicans and ensure that we have good governance with proper checks and balances that will give them the quality of life they need to enjoy Jamaica land we love. It is clear that this so-called constitutional reform is not a serious attempt to advance the welfare of the Jamaican people, but rather to protect the interests of the two colonial parties and the PSOJ oligarchs who funds and control them, and the media which they use to keep them in power and silence those they wish to keep out. That's their goal. Their goal is to make sure that the people of Jamaica are kept in the dark, and believe me, we're in the dark. The people of Jamaica are suddenly in the dark and have no idea what was done to them in 1834, in 1944, in 1962, and what is being done to them right now in 2024. Solidly in the dark. And they know this, and they plan to keep it that way. And we have to decide if we're going to allow them or not. If the objective or goal is simply to become a republic, using the commonly accepted but wrong definition of the same, all we need to do is remove any reference to the monarchy and establish a presidency, executive or ceremonial like Barbados, an argument done. But that's all we want. Yeah, that's it. If you want a republic, you just change the name of monarchy in the document and say president. do any other little window dressing you want to do, and you have a republic. But the UIC wants you to understand what a republic is. And that is not a republic. That is not a republic. That is not a republic. You want to know what a republic is? They've lied to you. They've given you the false impression that a republic is simply having a president. And sometimes when you go on their talk show, I was on one some time ago on CVM, and the lady was like, she's on the Constitutional Reform Committee, and she was like, oh, so what do you want? You want a presidential model like the US? So childish, so very amateur for a journalist. Come on, man, be a deeper thinker than that. And she's trying to corner me. You want to be like the US? And look at them. You want to be like that? I'm like, no, we're not imitating the US. We have a system. Do you want to understand it? She has no interest in understanding it. She just wants you to say whether it's a presidential model, and some want to say whether it's a ceremonial president or an executive. You have to go beyond that. That's very simplistic. There are many countries who have a parliament. A parliament doesn't mean that all parliaments operate the same way. A Congress doesn't mean that all Congress operates the same way. A prime minister doesn't mean all prime ministers operate the same way. A president doesn't mean all presidents operate the same way. So we have to get sensible now and start having more deeper conversation than these trivial, superficial conversations that we have. The question is, what is the role of your president? What is the role of your House of Representatives? What is the role of your senators? How are they elected? What are the checks and balances between them? What are the internal controls? Just having broad labels and generalization is dangerous. You tell people about becoming a republic. What is a republic? You need to tell people what is a republic. Now, the UIC's view of a republic is a nation state that fully respects and protects the individual sovereignty of every citizen, as well as the collective sovereignty of all citizens. It's not simply replacing the monarchy with a president. That's a nice little microscopic part of the bigger picture of solving the fundamental problem. And here's the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that we have lost sight of what it is we're fighting for, what it is we're fighting against. We have lost sight of the fact that throughout the history of humanity, there has been a constant struggle between those who desire to be free and those who seek to take away that freedom from them. This is the epic battle and the basis of practically all wars and various forms of slavery and myriad schemes of political trickery. At the heart of this dilemma is the unquenchable thirst of some to extract the wealth of others by way of force or fraud, plunder or deception, instead of trading value for value to the mutual benefit of all concerned. That is the fundamental issue. Now, we have had politicians who have guided us away from that, and they have guided us now to fight for all kinds of things, to the point that we're fighting to cut off our genitals. We're fighting to engage in all kinds of unhealthy and unwholesome sexual relations. We're fighting, at one point in the US, we were fighting to sleep in hotels where they don't want us to be in the hotels. We're fighting to sit in restaurants where they don't want us to sit in the restaurants. How ridiculous. Our fight is for freedom. Our fight is for the right to our lives, to our liberty, and to our property. Our fight is for self-determination, not for government handouts, not for government patronage, not for a paternalistic state, not for somebody to own and control us. And so we have lost our way. And because we have lost our way, now we are swaying in the wind, don't know where we need to be and what we need to be doing. And so people come to us with all kind of made up fantasies and call it a republic. Offer us many freebies, gradually taking away our freedom. Look at what they promised us. They promised us a national housing trust that would give us, we thought, somehow would miraculously get homes, but we didn't get into the details and understand how this works. So instead we end up with a system where they mandatorily take away our money without our permission, just take it away from us, and then give us back a benefit, in quotes, that results in 25 of us out of every 100 getting a small mattress box or somewhere thereabouts, and 75 of us help to pay for it and never get anything. Or the rich and powerful end up getting contracts, getting access to capital, getting approval from government, and the use of our NHD funds to build high-priced homes for those who can afford it, while those who were supposed to get poor people house benefit are still waiting. In fact, many of them, some of them, are in squalor communities, being called squatters and living on the margins, some on dangerous precipices that wash away during floods, because we don't understand what we should be fighting for. Then we get mesmerized by all kind of ideas, whether it be democratic socialism or let money jingle in your pocket or whatever it is. And we get caught up in all of that and miss what our ancestors fought for. Give us back our land. Better yet, let's take back our land. Let's take back our rights, take back our freedom. Nobody can come now and tell us about, in order for them to get IMF loan, they have to impose these things on us. In order to get the grants, they have to now impose these things on our children in our schools. We've lost our way. We've given these people too much power over us because we think that government should be our parent or daddy or God, when government is supposed to ensure that we have a safe environment, a clean environment, a very orderly environment, but are otherwise free to achieve our full and maximum potentials as individuals. We have an education system which is not used as a propaganda machine or a miseducation machine, not a monolithic thing that imprints on the minds one set of foolishness that then affects the entire nation. Somebody says the people want to support you, Mr. Patterson, but most have nothing, and they fear the little they have will be taken away if they stand with the UIC. The two parties have agents. You're so right that the two parties have agents. You see, this is how they have kept us slaves for years, until some of us develop the backbone to fight back. That's how they control us now. In slavery, there are three things they use to control a slave. Number one is fear. You're fearful that they are going to kill you. You're fearful that they are going to take away something of value from you. And so because of that fear, you remain a slave. You live a little longer as a slave. It's understandable. Nobody wants to die, right? Nobody wants to suffer. But it's still a mechanism. And the few of us who decided not to be afraid and choose to be strategic and choose to fight back, and in the process, make life uncomfortable for our oppressors, very uncomfortable. And then the oppressors have to find new ways to try to placate us. And that's why in 1834, they gave us fake freedom. They say, you're free, but we're going to keep your land. We're going to keep the wealth derived from your labor. And we're not going to correct the fact that we have kept you ignorant, so that you're now lacking the intellect that you need. So yeah, but that fake freedom came because we made their lives difficult, and also global economy was changing as well, and pieces come together and make it more logical for them to try a different way. Same thing in 1944, we made their lives a bit difficult. Again, the world was changing, and we got some adjustment, which meant we could now vote, and we had a fake democracy and fake self-governance. But we still agitated some more, to the point where they gave us a fake independence and a fraudulent constitution. But the point is, some of us had to stand up, and this made the difference. Yeah. And so we who are alive and remain, we who are here, who have the luxury of a greater understanding, the luxury of technology, the luxury of more freedoms than our parents and grandparents and their parents, we now have a duty, in my opinion, to do more than what we've been doing so far. So they use fear to control the slaves, and they also use ignorance to control the slave. Keep them ignorant. And finally, they use poverty of means. But I tell you this, we are not too poor to rise up. Just imagine if every Jamaican understood that all they had to do was to give the UIC $250 a week to be able to fight for them. Just like a lawyer. How do you do with a lawyer? You pay the lawyer to fight for you. You give the lawyer resources. If the lawyer is hungry, if the lawyer is barefoot, if the lawyer can't have access to the things to do the work you're asking him to do, then he can't do it. So we are relying on the system of our oppressors, their model of funding political parties. We're telling ourselves to go follow their model to do the work. It's impossible, guys. If we do that, the UIC is dead. The moment the UIC joins the same model of funding, you can just forget about it, because there's no point. Why? You don't need three of the same foolishness. You don't need three colonial parties. Two is enough. And by the way, the PSOJ oligarchs wouldn't fund a third, except, I'll tell you when they'll fund a third. Here's the trick. If they think that it's better for them to fund a third so that they can mislead the people into believing that there's change coming, they'll do it. So let's say, for example, one of the two becomes very unpopular because of whatever reason, and we in the UIC lose our moral bearing, lose our mandate and vision and mission, and take their money and allow them to compromise our values. And then you say, yay, you're now happy because the UIC now has all the flash and the bling. We can pay for everything now. We have vehicles, we have staff, we have offices, we have everything. Not because you have stepped up to the plate, but because your enemy has now bought us out to give you the impression that we are now better. And then you will now feel confident to join and volunteer because you feel confident. But it's a fake confidence. You have been conned. You have been tricked. And believe me, if the UIC should die, and another third party, there have been about 66 so far, another third party should arise. And then one day you see it suddenly have all the things without you doing your part. Mark my words, you're being conned. Very simple. Just like when they send people into the UIC to tear us down from the inside, to give you the impression that you shouldn't trust us. They'll do anything. They will raise up another party if that's what is necessary. They'll give it all the things that it needs to have so that you are fooled. And I'm saying to us, let's stop being fools now. Let's wake up now. We have had enough history. We can now learn from history and not repeat it. We see how the game set. We see what they have done. We see how they destroy Mark Garvey. We see how they destroy the Marcus Garvey party. Yeah. We see how they have kept all the other third parties out for various reasons. Some self-inflicted wounds by some. But now we have the UIC. Look how long we have stood up. We have been standing up. All kind of problems, only for problems, lots and lots of problems. They've thrown at us left, right, and center. And more so me, because they know that, based on the normalcy of war, if they cut off the head, then the body will just dissipate. So they've targeted me in particular, and they don't fully understand it because I withstood so much of their attacks, and they can't. Why is he still standing? But I'm still here, and I'm inviting you to be here with me just as much. And let's get this thing on the road. But here's the thing. If we want a more just and equitable society, a society of equal opportunity, equal rights, and equal justice, if we want a far more inclusive, transparent, and transformative and educational process to bring us to a new constitution, there's only one way to get it. And it's if we, the people, recognize what was done to us and rise up and join hands and say, no more. I am done with this. Not happening again. No more. If we do that, if we rise up and join hands together, we can create that new Jamaica that we want. The two colonial parties and their founding leaders, Norman Manley and Alexander Bustamante, were agents of the British Crown. They are what you call controlled opposition. They were used to manipulate and subjugate the African majority to serve the interest of the plantocracy or the PSOJ oligarchy. These two colonial parties had 80 years to unite, to liberate, and empower the people, but they chose instead to try and make entrenched the British monarchy together with its divide and conquer system by way of a fraudulent constitution. These two colonial parties maintained the system of crown and government lands and required the people to slave and buy back the land that was stolen from their ancestors. They had 80 years to give the people back the land as reparation, but instead they called us squatters They bulldozed our homes, and they bribed some of us into garrisons via a corrupt system of plot distributions. These two colonial parties maintained a Eurocentric education system that has now gotten to the place where it's failing 70% or more of our students annually. Our kids are lost. They've created a colonial police force that has no respect for us. They've created a master-slave, trickle-down economic system that concentrates wealth in the hands of a few, while forcing the best and brightest of us into economic refugee status abroad. These two colonial parties endorsed and embellished the fake freedom or so-called emancipation of 1834. They led us into a fake democracy of 1944, and then they championed the fake independence of 1962 and installed a fake and fraudulent constitution that was never ratified by the people of Jamaica. Their fake 1962 constitution, which is really an order in council by the colonial master, is not of the people. It is not for the people, nor was it ever ratified by the people. We were never consulted about it, nor voted in a referendum to ratify it. It is therefore a lie, a deception, a fraudulent document, and a sham of a constitution. It is not the law of the land, and it has no say in how we go about establishing a new and true constitution. These two colonial parties have no moral or legal authority to reform, to rewrite, or impose any constitution whatsoever on the people of Jamaica. Their Constitutional Reform Committee is as fraudulent as their constitution and government. Their constitution, their government must be replaced by the people of Jamaica with immediate effect. And they must be charged, they must be tried, and they must be sentenced for high treason in the way that their colonial masters unjustly tried and executed Sam Sharp, Paul Bogle, and George William Gordon. We cannot reform. We cannot edit. We cannot update a foundationally fraudulent or fake constitution. We must rubbish it, rip it up, burn it up, and replace it with a completely new and true constitution. One that is designed to unite us as a people, to liberate us as a race, and to empower every man, woman, and child. We have to overcome the Eurocentric destruction of our people. I submit that the vision of our new constitution should be a Jamaica that brings out the best in all its people. And our mission must be to create a non-partisan constitutional republic of Jamaica, one that is safe, one that is clean, one that is orderly. A Jamaica where everyone has equal opportunity, equal rights, and equal access to justice. A Jamaica where everyone can live, earn, and retire with dignity in true liberty. So I guess my call to action is for us to rise up and say no to this fraudulent process. Say no to the credibility of the participants. Say no to their referendum. Boycott their attempts at further deception, and let us write our own Declaration of Independence and have a new leadership, a new system, and a new Jamaica. And that begins by you owning your own party, by joining, volunteering, and donating to build the UIC, and then to elect your own UIC candidates to bring about the change that you want to see. Let's start there. Nothing else that we do, save a violent revolution, is going to bring about the change that we want. and I do not subscribe to a violent revolution. We may have to, but we don't have to go there first. Our first attempt must be to organize. Instead of sacrificing blood, let's sacrifice our money. Let's sacrifice our time. Let's sacrifice our talent. And let us organize. They cannot overcome an organized group of people. They can overcome a divided group. Let's turn our backs on all of those splinter groups that are out there trying to tear each other down. Let us look at the U in the UIC, united. Let's look at the I, independent thinkers. Let's look at the C, Congress. And let's understand what we're fighting for, our freedom. If we remain divided as we are, they are united. The two parties, the two colonial parties, are united with the PSOJ and the colonial masters against us. They're working hand in hand every day to keep in place the system they've had in place for more than 500 years. The system of master-slave economics, the system of division and deception, the system of divide and conquer. They're keeping that in place. And as long as we're divided, as long as we're fearful, as long as we remain ignorant, as long as we keep allowing our poverty to suggest to us that we can't do anything, they win. And they will impose upon us another fraudulent document and claim that we're a republic. We will never be a republic until we are free, truly free. That begins, first of all, with your individual sovereignty. Don't make nobody fool you. Having a president doesn't make you free, doesn't make you a republic. You want to be free in deed, you want to be free in truth, you want to be free in substance. And that means nobody can impose their sexual agenda on you. Nobody can impose anything that tells you that your speech is hate speech or misinformation because that's your opinion. Nobody can take away your right to freedom of movement and freedom of association and freedom of speech and freedom of choice. That's what a republic is. So if you want a real republic, if you want real freedom, you have to have the courage. You have to overcome all the internal conflicts that is preventing you from joining hands with me. That's our symbol, the UIC symbol, the joining of hands. Because if we not join hands, they are going to overcome us. They are going to destroy us. We're going to become tenants in our own country. Other nationalities are going to come in. They're going to take Jamaican citizenships and they're going to take our land. They're going to push us out on the margins. We're going to be almost like the slaves we were 200 years ago, 180 years ago. We're going to be fake free, free but not free, free to beg a job, free to be a squatter, free, and by that I mean to go try and squat and get yourself brutalized by your own government. We're going to have free bad education, free bad health care, free whatever, but poor quality. My friends, we have to rise up. We have to rise up. I've given it my all. I've done all I can do. I'd love to do more, but I can't do more without you. There's no way for me to do more without you. We have to do it together. So in the name and spirit of Nani, Sam Sharp, Bogle, Marcus Garvey, I implore you, don't allow them to give us one more fake constitution. Don't allow them to destroy our children by sexualizing them in schools. Don't allow them to destroy our people by destroying our morality and our mentality. Don't allow them to take away our freedom of speech, our freedom of movement, or freedom of association. Don't allow them to take away your bodily autonomy. They came this close to doing it just the other day. Right now, I'm still in court. I'm going to court again on July 10th and July 23rd. Fighting for what? Don't let this be in vain, my friends. Don't let this be in vain. Stand up, man. Whether you're here in Jamaica or abroad, you can make a difference. But you have to be willing to do more than just observe, more than just wish, hope, or pray. You have to get involved. Give that gift to your children and your children's children. Be a part of those who stood up for justice, who stood up for liberty, who stood up for yourself. Thank you very much. Have a good night until we meet again. Go to our website at uicjamaica.com and sign up today, and let's work together. Take care, and all the best to you. I see a lot of comments here, but I'm way past my time. I won't be able to comment on them. But thanks again for being here tonight. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your comments, everyone. Douglas Harper, good to see you, and all of you who joined me here tonight. Thank you so much. Let's work together and create one Jamaica, because we're stronger together. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.